as a kid, one of my Sunday tea time treats that I used to like really enjoy was having some Battenberg cake. And this popped up on Cake Jemma, as usual, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go with that because I love Battenberg. I mean, I particularly love the marzipan, and I know marzipan isn't everybody's flavour or everybody's cup of tea, but it is mine. The wife said she don't like it, so this whole cake could be for me. So we're going to make everything. We're going to make the cake, and we're going to make the marzipan, and we're going to put it all together to make that classic British cake, the Battenberg. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take some butter, and I've got 175 grams of unsalted butter, and I'm just going to put that into the mixer. And as is usual with these sort of cakes, we're then going to take some caster sugar, and I've got here 175 grams caster sugar, and we're going to chuck that in there. And what we're going to do to begin with is we're just going to cream these together for about 4 minutes on a sort of medium, okay? Now, before I get that going and make all the noise, I've got my oven on. We're going to be baking this at 170. Now, you can buy tins to make these in, because classic Battenberg, well, the classic Battenberg of today is 4 bits of cake, if you like. But to buy a tin just for that, because that's all you'd use it for, seems a bit expensive. So what I've done instead, the classic Battenberg tin has 4 slats. Okay, what I've done here is I've using grease paper, baking paper, whatever you call it. I've done a fold in the middle, so we're going to divide this up into 2 sections. And the idea being that we will then later slice each section in half, so that we get our 4 strips of cake. So I've lightly stuck that in there with a bit of oil so it doesn't flap about. Obviously it's going to be a little bit trickier down the edge here, but once we get both bits of cake in, or batter in, it should hold together fine. So I've prepared that. My oven's coming up to temperature, so let's get creaming. So that's got that nicely creamed together. What we're going to do now is we're going to add 3 eggs, but we'll add them one at a time. Okay, and then we'll beat each one in thoroughly before we add the next. So, I'm saying to you that this is a British cake. You would think with a name like a Battenberg, it's probably Germanic, but it's not. It's British. Although, really, the true origins of this cake isn't that truly well known. Different parts of the country have different names for it. So, for instance, domino cake, checkerboard cake, and in some parts of England it's known as the church window cake, because it's a little bit reminiscent of a window, although normally a church window would be arched, you imagine, wouldn't it? So, where did this cake come from? Or, what was the origin of this cake? Well, I'm going to get the rest of the eggs beaten in, and then before we move to the next stage, I'll give you a little bit more. Right, so that's them eggs beaten into that. So what we're going to add now is some almond flour, ground almonds, almond flour. I've got 50 grams of that. I've got half a teaspoon of baking powder. I know we've used self-raising flour, but we want to, obviously make sure it's just right. And then I've got, well, I haven't added it yet, have I? Self-raising flour. How much of that have I got? I've got 140 grams. And what we're going to do is now on low, we're just going to make sure that's all combined together. Okay, and then the only other thing we're going to be adding to all of it is some vanilla extract. Now, if you actually watch this on Gemma, she actually splits it into 2, like we're going to anyway, and puts vanilla in one half and almond extracts in the other half. I've got the almond extract. So I'm just going to put vanilla in the whole batch. So, I was saying about the origins of Battenberg, and one theory, completely unsubstantiated, but because of the name Battenberg, is that this was actually a cake made to celebrate a wedding. So it's sort of a wedding cake, isn't it? In 1884, it was Prince Louis of Battenberg, I think it's Battenberg, married Queen Victoria's granddaughter, Princess Victoria. And the story is, well, obviously, the Battenberg name comes from that. And why have we got 4 squares? Well, that's because that's for Louis and his 3 other brothers, hence 4 squares. So, that's the popular idea where the name comes from. So, I'm going to add ½ teaspoon of vanilla extract and gently mix that in. But, there's always a but, isn't there? 4 squares for the 4 brothers. Except Battenberg didn't start out as 4 squares. So I'm going to split this in half. Okay, so I've got 648 grams of that. So I want 324. Okay, in each half. And the reason we're splitting it is because we need to, flicking it everywhere. We need to colour it. Almost there. Right, now classically the 2 squares of 2 of the squares, there's 4 squares in the but 2 of them will be pink and 2 yellow, and Gemma, she just uses some pink and she leaves the other one there natural yellow, but I always remember it being a bit more yellow than that, so I'm going to add, where's my thing gone? I'm going to add a little bit. I'm only going to use a touch of the yellow, so we want it to be a nice pink colour, but the yellow, just going to add a little touch of pink, yellow. Oh, I'll get there in the end, won't I? But to do that, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a small portion of it to begin with, okay, and we're going to add the colouring. So like I say, this is my yellow, so I'm not going to add an awful lot of that. Okay, we're going to blend it in, and then I'm going to then add that in there, get it all over me, and we'll blend the 2 together so that we don't sort of knock too much air out of that. And then I'll do the same with the pink, and then we'll be ready to start putting it into the tin. So here's my nicely coloured up batter, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to put this down one side, and then using a spatula we'll just smooth it out. So I was just said to you, one of the problems with the idea of it being 4 brothers, hence the 4 squares of the Battenberg, is that, well, actually the earliest recorded recipe for the Battenberg was actually, although admittedly it was a few years later than the actual wedding, but not many, it actually had 9 squares. So the idea that it came from the Battenberg brothers seems a little bit unlikely. And in fact, there's even records suggesting that the some of the earlier Battenbergs had up to 24. So I'm just going to get these 2 nicely spread in there, and then, like I say, we're baking this in the oven. Well, be difficult to bake it outside, wouldn't it? We're going to bake it in the oven, 170, for about 20-25 minutes. Okay, but obviously until it's done. So I'm going to finish off the other half, smooth that one a bit more, and then we'll get baking, and while we're doing that, we'll prepare the marzipan. And I'll tell you a little bit more, just to finish off, about what's known about the Battenberg. So, I said to you, we're going to make the marzipan. You can buy marzipan if you want cheap. I don't care. Do what you want. We're going to make it. So for that, we're going to need some more almond flour. But we want to give this a little bit of a blitzing in the food process to get it a bit finer. So I've got 150 grams of that going in there. And the other thing I'm going to put in there at this stage is some icing sugar, and I've got 180 grams of that. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to make a nice mess everywhere because it will come out the sides. We're just going to blitz this together for about 20 to 30 seconds. Now, we don't want any lumps in it. Just make sure you have lumps in it if you want it. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to tip that out of there, and then we'll just, well, don't you dare go everywhere. You've got any icing sugar left. Well, certainly not enough to do that again. And so just going to sift that through, put that back in there, and then I'm just going to give it a quick little whisk, and then we're just going to add final 2 ingredients to that. Right, so that's that done. So what I'm going to do, if you add some almond extract, which I didn't have, at this point you would add half a teaspoon of that. I'm just going to add a half a teaspoon of vanilla. I like the vanilla. And then the other thing I've got here is 30 grams of pasteurised egg white. Okay, so in that goes, a bit frothy. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to blitz this together until it starts coming together like a bit of a dough, and then we'll just finish it off on the worktop. So I've kneaded it together, and I've done it in a nice little shape like that simply because I'm going to have to divide this up into 4. If it gets a bit sticky, then just add a little bit of almond flour. Okay, we don't want it sticky so it sticks to everything, but on the other hand we don't want it drying out, and this stuff dries very quickly. Hence I've wrapped it in some cling film, and we're just going to put that one side until we're ready. Now the cake's still got a few more minutes, so when the cakes come out, we'll let them cool a bit, and we'll just start the trimming to get it all to the right sizes. So there's the cake at the oven. You can see there, well, you can't really see the yellow too well because obviously it starts to brown on top. But what we can do is we can just transfer that out of there onto that wire rack. We'll let that cool a little bit more, and then what we'll do is we'll start trimming it. Obviously you need to get some straight edges, and we want 4 sort of equal sized squares, if you like. I know it ends up being rectangles, if you know what I mean, the ends. So I need to let that cool a little bit. We'll perhaps want to take the top off a little bit, but then like I say, just trim it, and then we'll be ready to start assembling it. Now to assemble it, you need your marzipan, like we made earlier, and you want some apricot jam. So I've got some apricot jam here. You might want to warm it a little bit to make sure it's runny, and if there's any lumps in it, then remove the lumps, because obviously we want, you know, smooth sticky jam on it, not, you know, lumps in the way. So it's just a matter of letting that cool. But anyway, going back to what I said about Battenberg. So the earliest recorded recipe was in a book by a man known as Frederick Vine, and that was in 1898, the Saleable Shop Goods book he wrote. And he was a very eminent baker, and he created a cake with 9 sections, okay, alternately red and white. So like a Battenberg, but with 9. And then in 1923, there's more recorded recipes and picture images showing 9 pieces. So highly unlikely that the Battenberg we know of today with the 4 squares comes back to the Victorian, you know, the wedding. So how did it suddenly become 4 squares? Well, the thought behind it is that sort of just for World War II, they started mass producing cakes and things like that. People like Lions Cakes started mass producing it, and obviously it was a bit tricky, unlike an assembly line as it were, making 9, so possibly that's why it ended up only being 4, but we don't really know. So anyway, we just need to let that cool a bit more, and then we'll do the trimming, and then we'll start making the final Battenberg. So there you go, there's my 4 strips. Perhaps not as square as they ought to be at the ends, but okay, this will do. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start assembling it. So it doesn't matter which colour you start with, but I'm going to take one of my yellow ones, okay, and using palette knife, I'm just going to apply some jam on the top, and then we'll take the opposite colour, so a pink one, and we're just going to place that on top. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to put some jam down the side on both, but remember the pink one will go on the bottom this time and the yellow on the top. So there's my Battenberg. Now the ends don't look quite great, but we will be trimming that, okay. But what we're now going to do before we start jamming it all up, we're going to do each side one at a time. I've also noticed actually I need to just trim a little bit off of that pink one, because that's not quite flat with that. What have I done with my cake? I lost where I put the rest of my cake. And that's a bit better. Now, like I said, what we want to do is do each side one at a time. So I'm going to take the marzipan, I'm going to divide it into 4, but I'm going to wrap the 3 bits that I'm not doing anything with back up while I do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out a strip long enough that we can just apply it to one side. So I've trimmed a straight edge along the bottom of the marzipan strip, and all I'm going to do now is just going to apply some jam along the side. Let's get a bit more jam out. Now some people roll it as a big sheet and then just wrap the whole thing in one go. We're going to do it one bit at a time. So I offer up that edge. I've got some crumbs all on there, but we can clean that off afterwards. Okay, so I'm just pressing that on there, and then all we do is just roll it down onto that surface, and then I'm just going to trim that marzipan off of there. So now all we're going to do is we're now going to then offer up the next one, stick that on, roll it like I just did, and we're going to keep doing that until all 4 sides are coated. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to trim this end. Now I'm going to trim that one quite a way back because that end's not quite right. Okay, so actually I'm going to use that bit for a taster. But there you go, you can see your classic 4 squares, okay, covered in marzipan. Just need to do a little bit of squaring up. But there you go, your classic British treat, well it certainly was for me on a Sunday tea time, Battenberg cake. Oh hang on, let's see what it tastes like. So it's going to be a bit difficult to eat this because it's like the end bit falling apart. Perhaps could do with a little bit more jam in it. Although I picked up the jam in that bit. And Definitely marzipan-y, as I remember it. Been a long time since I had any. Wife don't like it. Oh dear. But, cake's slightly different from what I remember. But I'm not sure whether this is a quirk of Jemma's, adding the almond flour into the cake mixture. Whether they do that shop bought one, I'll have to have a look. But very nice. Might have to have the other end bit with a cup of coffee, I think. So, classic Battenberg.